Good morning, YouTube friends. Thanks so much for coming by. Today we are making a vegan pecan pie that is so simple to make. It's so delicious and it doesn't have any corn syrup. Keep on watching to see how. Okay guys, we're going to get started with a super simple pie crust. You can obviously use store-bought as well, but this is really easy to do and I had all the ingredients on hand, so we're going to go for it. I've just got a bit of all-purpose flour, some sugar, and a bit of salt, as well as some Earth Balance vegan butter that I'm going to cut into it. It's going to make our crust nice and buttery and flaky. I will obviously leave all the ratios below in the description box, but all I'm going to do is use my fingers. You can also use a pastry cutter. I just really like to feel everything. I love cooking by feeling textures and knowing when it's ready that way. So I'm just pinching them apart and making them into about pea-sized chunks. And then we're going to slowly add some really, really cold water to it until it forms a dough. Now, as you can see, we've got our little bits here. We're going to slowly add about 2 tablespoons at a time of water until our dough just barely comes together. And then we're going to wrap it in some plastic wrap and let it sit in the fridge for at least a half an hour. We want that butter to get nice and hard again, and that's what's going to make a nice and flaky dough for us. You can also use vegetable shortening. That also makes a really flaky crust as well, but I had this butter in my fridge, actually in my mom's fridge. I'm at my mom's house making this on Thanksgiving, so we had it there, so that's what we used.
I can tell you what Christmas is all about. Although it's been said many times, many ways, Merry Christmas. That's what Christmas is all about. I guess I really don't know what Christmas is all about. Isn't there anyone who knows what Christmas is all about? I can tell you what Christmas is all about. Chestnuts roasting. Frost nipping at your nose. So I'm offering this simple phrase. Although it's been said many times, many ways, Merry Christmas.
And like I said earlier, once our dough comes together, we're just going to form it into a disc and wrap it in some saran wrap and throw it in the fridge. And my mom is extra with her saran wrap. This is super fancy saran wrap here. So we're just pushing that in there, gonna get it in the fridge for at least a half an hour. Closer to an hour would be better. Just gets your crust a lot more flaky. Now we're just gonna roll it out. I'm actually trying to roll it out super thin. I like a crispy, thin crust, and it actually helps with calories in my mind, so that's why I'm making it so thin here. You obviously don't need to do that. Fun little fact, though, I didn't know this until a couple days ago, that Steve's favorite Thanksgiving pie is pecan pie, and I didn't even know I liked pecan pie until I tried out making this recipe. It is not as sweet as pecan pies I've had in the past, and I thought it'd be really fun to try to veganize it, and Steve ended up loving it, so yay, win-win. So now that we've got our dough nice and thin, I'm going to just fold it into fourths and plop it into our pie pan. Got this beautiful casserole type pie dish that my aunt made that we always make our pies or casseroles in for holidays. So I'm just draping it over here, and I'm going to try and pinch it as best as possible where it's so thin it's not going to crimp like a really thick pie crust, but it's going to look good and rustic, and it's going to taste amazing.
I can tell you what Christmas is all about.
Chestnuts roasting, Jack Frost nipping at your nose. So I'm offering this simple phrase. Although it's been said many times, many ways, Merry Christmas to you. Chestnuts roasting, Jack Frost nipping at your nose. So I'm offering this simple phrase.
Once we've got that pie crust settled in there and a bit of crimping action, I'm just going to poke a few holes in the dough and let it sit in the fridge until we're ready to fill it with our filling, which we are now working on. I've got a cup of coconut milk here. It's a little chunky, but it's going to smooth out, don't worry. And I believe 3 tablespoons of tapioca starch. I'm just going to whisk those together until we have a nice smooth mixture. This tapioca starch is going to act kind of like our binder and our egg that you would normally have in a pecan pie. It's going to thicken everything up. So we're just going to whisk it until it's smooth. And then I am going to heat up a large pan with some more vegan butter here. Again, I will leave all the ingredients and amounts below. The struggle is apparently really real. Here's all the butter. We need all the butter, folks, right? As Paula Deen says. So once it's nice and melted, I am going to toss in some pecans here. I've got 12 ounces. I'm just going to coat them all in the butter. And once they get just a bit toasted, once you can smell a little bit of fragrantness, we're talking like 2 minutes. We don't want to burn anything. We don't want to super cook anything because we are going to bake it. Once we've got it nice and glazed like so, and you can kind of smell them cooking, we're going to add the rest of the ingredients and stir them in. I have got some coconut sugar, a bit of salt, and then some maple syrup. These we're using instead of corn syrup. They still are sugary, but they're much more low glycemic, and they work just as well, and they make it not so crazy sweet, although they do sweeten quite a bit. Now we're adding our tapioca starch and coconut milk mixture. We're just going to stir it up and pour it right into our raw pie crust. Okay, here we go. We've got our little pre-pricked pie crust. Look how beautiful and caramely those pecans look. Now the way that I modified this recipe, I'm using more pecans and less filling than you normally would in a traditional pecan pie, which I prefer. You can always make more of the filling and it gets it more goopy, but this ratio is perfect to me. It's not too crazy sweet. It's got a really nice crunch to it. You'll see just in a moment. It already smells insane here, in a good way. And since I'm using a slightly unconventional pie tin here, it's not quite as high as a normal pie pan would be. I'm just smooshing the dough, that's a technical term, smooshing. I'm smooshing it down onto the pie so we don't have a ton of crust sticking out so it burns. So I'm just kind of trying to make it pretty around it and fit in really nicely, like so. Then we're just going to pop it into a 350-degree oven for about 40 minutes. I'd check it at 30. Make sure your pie crust isn't burning, but there aren't eggs in this. There isn't much to set. It's going to just need a titch of heat for about, like I said, a half hour to 40 minutes. And that's what she'll look like. Isn't that gorgeous? My favorite thing about this pie is you can sneak pecans and nobody knows if you, if you don't lay it out all pretty. Little pro tip there. So I snuck quite a few pecans while I was waiting for it to cool. It's so yummy. And to up the decadence factor just a little bit, we added some almond milk Ready Whip. You can also use vanilla bean ice cream. It's perfection. I hope you guys give this a try. My whole family's not vegan and they absolutely loved it. Steve loved it. So stoked about that. Let me know what you think of the recipe. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that your holiday season is going fabulously. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.